Okay, so this is the Economic Development Commission meeting of Thursday, May 7th. We're meeting in the Old Town Hall Conference Room as well as via Zoom. It's now 8:30. We do have a quorum. I'll turn things over to you, Mr. Chair.
We have a full and robust agenda today. So first order of business, just approve minutes from last meeting. All those in favor?
Okay. Moving right along.
Well, I'll turn things over to you. I know we have guests today presenting, so excited to hear that and dig right in.
Yeah, so we're pleased to be joined by Ken Kleban, president of Kleban Properties, who made it back from Alabama last night. So we're very happy that he could spend some time with us this morning to talk about a proposed mixed-use development on Dolan's Corner. I do have a copy of the presentation that was provided to the Planning and Zoning Commission, which I'll share my screen. And with that, I'll turn things over to you, Ken.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a couple of years since I've been in front of this commission, and we've been all that active in development in Fairfield. During that time, I guess the last thing we actively developed was the community theater renovation, which we're proud of. We had the support, I know, Ken, of the commission then, and we hope to have the support for future development, including this one at Dolan's Corner. Dolan's Corner, obviously, an iconic corner, part of Fairfield. I don't know if all of you grew up in Fairfield, but I'm sure some of you did. And I spent a good part of my childhood in that general area, going into everything from Posters Hardware, Angus Barn, and Angus Steakhouse. So we've talked to the Dolan family over the course of the past 15 years, and Mike, who is a local lawyer, has led the team for his siblings, and just really about 5 or 6 months ago, he was looking to reach out to me, and coincidentally, I reached out to him as I do every year, and the timing was right. So we talked about a number of things that he would like to see happen, that we would like to see happen, but more importantly, what we think the town would like to see happen. And I do mean that sincerely, more importantly. We have never been an organization that has bucked what the town as writ large has wanted. And we've never been in arguments with the Economic Development Commission, the town zoning boards, the building departments. That's just not the way we do it. You'll never see a lawsuit from us against a zoning decision. It's been a difficult time, obviously, over the course of the past couple of years, everything from 830G to just the growth in the multifamily market, influx of people. So we do have our ear to the ground, and we've tried to design a plan for that corner that meets a lot of the stated goals of the town government, as well as social media and other influencers that affect what happens in town. And we focused on a few things: traffic, congestion, pedestrian access, connectivity. And I think we have achieved a lot of that and more in this design. Obviously, not yet approved. We will have our code review sometime later this month, and then look to be on the commission's agenda within 30 to 60 days after that. So ideally, we would look to begin work on the property before the end of the year. The plan would be to bring both buildings down to their foundation, but we would not be increasing the footprint of developed property on the site by more than about 10%. The warehouse area behind Posters, I'm sure most of you are familiar with that, would come down. There'd be a little bit of an additional footprint on the rear building, which is primarily medical right now, but the footprint would mostly stay the same. The front building on Black Rock Turnpike, which is now 1 story, would become 2 stories, together with an activated roof. for outdoor dining, as well as some other activities, which I can explain in a minute. The rear building would be 3 stories, 2 stories of office, and the third story would also be office, but really it would be more as specialized office units. So 4 units, probably of about 1,500 square feet. We have addressed the connectivity problems and the traffic problems with a closure of 2 curb cuts on Black Rock Turnpike, close to the light there. We've proposed to close 1 curb cut on Stilson, and we have proposed to open up the connection between the Dolan property, now Dolan property, and the Old Navy Center next door, which we co-own with Regency Centers in a joint venture. We have received a parking analysis from SLR Company, which is probably the first analysis that will get used in front of the commission under the new regulations. That analysis and the use of those analyses is something that I've long championed, as Mark knows, as opposed to the strict 5 per 1,000 or 1 per 40 square feet for patronarian restaurants. It's so arbitrary, and it doesn't take advantage of the off-peak uses and so many other things. This, I think, was a great decision by the town. And this will be the first time, I think, that the town will review a parking analysis for this particular purpose. So you will be able to enter the Old Navy Center and the area by AT&T, Massage Envy, Double Cookies, and travel all the way through to Stilson Road without going on Black Rock Turnpike. It is possible that there'll be greater connectivity with the property on the other side of on Stilson Avenue, further to the south. We don't know yet. We'd like to try to make that happen. And with regard to the buildings themselves, again, not approved, so I don't mean to take any liberties here, but we want the building to be a wellness center. This is something that we haven't discussed in public yet, not before today at least, and we have trademarked the name Well at Fairfield. The idea would be that the wellness focus today, everything from longevity and flexibility and general well-being focus that you see all over the country now would be, this building would be more or less limited to that use. So, for example, we are actively negotiating leases that have already been started by signed letters of intent with Sweat House, which is a company that does sauna and plunge pools and infused showers and things like that. They have a franchise in Westport. With Serotonin Centers, which is a group out of Stamford that does counseling for well-being. With Pilates centers like Solid Core and another Pilates center, the name escapes me. We have 2 letters of intent, choosing which one to go with right now. We're looking to put a cafe, again, a health focus on Black Rock Turnpike. And that'll probably be about it for that building, with the exception of a restaurant, which will be where the current Little Pub is, and it will go on 2 floors with an outdoor deck. Bringing up that name, Little Pub, and some of the other tenants, I wanted to explain that we have reached out to all of them, despite what we may have been accused of. We have been very sensitive to the existing tenants. We've worked with Bert at Boasters and let him know that And by the way, none of them have leases other than Little Pub. So this is something that Mike Dolan and his siblings have long anticipated would happen, and we would have hoped that he would have prepared his tenants. But regardless, we've reached out to all of them and offered as good, if not better, space in the neighborhood to them, all of them. That's the flower shop, that's Posters Hardware, and we have talked also to Little Pub about that. None of them have taken us up on it yet. I think Posters is preferring to sell the business first before he makes a move with regard to a new location. Same thing with the flower shop. The rear building, we have offered better and similar space at the same price to Dr. Im, who's a dentist there, Tom Uditsky, who's an attorney there.
Avery Center, who took us up on it.
Avery Center is the one who's already taken us up on it. That is the medical OBGYN practice, right, in the rear. And we've relocated him to Turnpike Shopping Center, Office Center, Office Plaza, adjacent and behind ShopRite. So no one's being thrown out. We're trying to find locations that are suitable for all of them. As I said, what we want to create is a wellness center. We think it'll be well received. It's the type of thing that should be in a town that's attracting young and vibrant growth with 2 universities, one in very, very close proximity, obviously. And I guess that's really all I have to say. But do you have anything to add?
I don't think so. Sorry for coming a little late, but
Maybe with regard to the buildings themselves, either structurally or aesthetically?
well, the goal is to match the footprint as much as possible. A couple areas where we're going to have to shift it a little bit, work within new zoning regs, setbacks, the rest of it. But the goal was really to make it feel like we're, as much as possible, just adding on to what's existing. Obviously, it's going to be really difficult to do that because what's there is old and structurally probably can't support a second floor. So, we're going to try as much as we can to save some aspects of the building, but it will be a major renovation. But the goal was really to take what's there, which we're all familiar with. We understand how it looks from the street, and just add that second floor, activate the street the way the zoning commission has encouraged everyone. Try and make Black Rock Turnpike more of a pedestrian street, which we see as fully possible. A little bit more modern look, maybe something a little bit exciting for Black Rock Turnpike. So I know there's all sorts of opinions on what everyone likes or doesn't like, but we certainly thought it was a nice opportunity for something new on Black Rock Turnpike.
And we've listened to those opinions, and we continue to encourage all to give us those opinions in the right form, obviously. But we're here to listen. We're not here just to propose.
How old is the current Nolan's Corner building?
The front building probably dates back to the early 50s.
I believe so, yeah.
I'm just curious, that's just such a difficult intersection to cross now. What your traffic study shows, or the pedestrian study, and how that's mitigated, I guess.
When you say the intersection, you mean across Black Rock Turnpike or Stilson?
Either. I see high school kids there all the time, and just sort of darting across, or
Yeah.
it's just a really difficult section to cross. And if this helps mitigate it, if this compounds it.
I think the elimination of some of the curb cuts will definitely help. Pushing those driveway access points further from the intersection eliminates potential conflict points and makes it a little clearer. And the parking is all in the interior of the lot, so I think again that would help with flow internally, internal circulation, as well as access externally onto Stilson and Black Rock Turnpike.
So does the Starbucks entrance and exit go away right there?
No, unfortunately,
No,
That's on their
Starbucks
property.
Starbucks
Okay.
is not part of this development. Again, just like with the Dolan property, we've been talking to the owners of the Starbucks property for
Yeah.
many, many years.
Yeah.
One time it was for
Could use a
sale.
little
Sorry?
revitalization as well, that building. Yeah.
It could, it's a family situation that's evolving. The decision makers are actually in Seattle, not in Fairfield. But we're engaged in conversations with them. They're friendly conversations. They know what our intent is, what our hope is. And we'll be patient. And we think that when that does happen, there's even the opportunity for greater connectivity, greater patron area outside, greater pedestrian access. We have a number, you can see that is an entire pedestrian plaza on Black Rock Turnpike in front of the building. There's also outdoor dining to the left on Stilson and on Black Rock Turnpike in front of the structure itself.
Yeah, one of the things that came out of the Black Rock Turnpike corridor study and looking at road safety improvements for all users of the roadway is, the number of conflict points and the fact that, again, there aren't these cross property connections. So this internal circulation plan that encourages cross connections between parcels so people don't have to exit onto Black Rock Turnpike to go to the parcel property next door, and eliminating some of these curb cuts and pushing them further away from the intersection are key. There were key recommendations of that study. So we're happy that Cleveland Properties is taking a look at and implementing some of those recommendations.
We hope to be back in front of you sometime in the next couple of months with some ideas which will allow a connection, frankly, from Stilson Road all the way to Katona Road without going on Black Rock Turnpike.
It's on the other side of the.
Oh, wow.
Curious, just the traffic. I mean, you're doubling the space by with the second floor, or reasonably something like that, and adding the third floor. What the comparative traffic is to what it is now compared to what you forecast if at full occupancy.
The, you want to address it?
I don't recall the
not a
delta from
traffic
what's,
study.
the traffic study's not done, the parking study has been done, and I don't recall the change from what it is currently to fully occupied. The traffic study shows at full occupancy, I think it's about 79-80% of the combined lots would be used, but we have not finished the actual traffic study yet.
I was more curious, and it's probably like Little Pub's obviously busier, like dinner hour and so on. But like the traffic flow, and because I know you have that two other 830G projects coming online, one across Stilson, and then isn't there one in back of it as well that is pending?
There is
There's one, yeah, next door. There's
that is a really
there's two
outsized-
proposals for it, right?
Yeah, isn't that a fairly outsized? I mean, comparative, like.
No, I don't believe so. I think that what they are intending to do at this point is 16 townhomes.
Yeah, the preference is to do 16 or 19, something like that, townhomes, but there was a companion 830G application filed, both of which are under appeal. So the 830G is a larger development, but I think the preference would be, both from the town and from the developer's perspective, is to do the more modest townhome development.
Yeah, I know you have to make a decision based on not what ifs, but what you have. Just want to understand, because if I'm remembering that other one was like really outsized, it was like 80 units or something.
60, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't believe they're prepared to go forward on the 66. I think they're planning on going forward on the townhouse units instead. If they even get that far.
Yeah, they've got to get through the appeal.
We're currently exiting on Stilson from behind Little Pub. Turning right is not really much of an issue, but turning left, with all the traffic coming up to the traffic signal on Black Rock Turnpike, can be a real challenge. So what do you anticipate exiting on that Stilson from behind the building? How's that going to work?
Well, right now you can exit from two different curb cuts. It's one very large one,
Yep.
and then the small one behind the second building, right?
Yeah.
So that curb cut going into the plaza from Stilson will be one way going in. The exit onto Stilson will be behind the rear building.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, so you're pushing it further down, so it's,
yeah.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
this will be the in, and then it'll come out.
Oh.
The other thing is that we've adjusted our plan somewhat because I believe the town is contemplating widening Stilson to extend that left turn lane,
Okay,
which would certainly make it a lot easier.
yeah.
Right, that is inherent in the plan.
What's the comparison between the current parking, the number of spots you have today versus what you have proposed here?
You mean the number of spots?
Yeah, the number.
Number of spots is really unchanged by very little, right?
It goes down, I think, a little bit, but we've been looking at it essentially holistically, the entire shopping center. So we're comparing it, what's existing versus how it would be combined with the Gap Old Navy Center.
As Evan mentioned, I think peak demand would show somewhere in the 70% range, but the average demand over the course of the day and week would be somewhere around 39%. It's a big parking field.
And I know we were just talking about entrance and exit. On the Black Rock Turnpike side, is there entrance and exit, or is that the current Starbucks one that I see on the top left?
it should be I think the way they described it, it's the light, correct? That you'd be driving them to the main entrance at Old Navy?
Correct.
Right.
Correct. There's no curb cut in to the new development on Black Rock Turnpike, other than by between the two buildings, the Crumble Cookie, Massage Envy, AT&T building, and the Old Navy building, the existing two-way.
Okay, gotcha.
Will this access the parking in back of like Jersey Mike's and all that?
Yes, absolutely. That's the full point, is that the parking field becomes completely merged, and it's one car trip, and you can go through the entire center.
Including I guess it's about 17 spaces underneath the building, which are primarily used by the Wings Over Water and Playhouse tenants.
Other questions? Steve, Colin, Kenny, Matt?
I guess I didn't get a clear answer. Is like the current occupancy now versus the projected occupancy, like how many more?
In terms of square feet?
Yeah, I mean, I assume there's gonna be a restaurant there as well, obviously outside dining. Just comparing, you're doubling the space. I mean, how
Yeah,
much
because they're
more?
going up, right? There's a
They're
second.
going up, but you're still gonna get potentially double the amount of people using that.
Again, there's retail on the first floor, on the front building, which includes food service, but then you have primarily office.
Primarily office and low-density retail. So, for example, I mentioned earlier Sweat House. They typically will have about two people two working employees at any one time, and no more than 7 or 8 patrons at any one time. They're limited by their model. The same thing with the Pilates studio. That would be limited to 1 or 2 employees at any one time, and no more than about 15 in the studio at one time.
And those tenants are committed, not prospective.
Committed in terms of letters of intent, non-binding, with
Yeah, obviously you have the sure.
with leases being written and negotiated now.
How long was the lease with Little Pub?
Little Pub's lease ends on January 31st of 2027.
Okay. And I guess they're still going to operate after that tomorrow?
They haven't told us exactly what they will do, but the likely scenario is that they'll work through the holidays, yes.
And we've reached out to Little Pub as well. I think their intent would be to some remain somewhere in Fairfield if we can find a location for them, so,
They're quite popular among
yep,
university families
yep, yeah.
on both
I have a
sides.
question. What size, how much of the space is being apportioned to a restaurant or food and beverage?
Total?
It's about 35, it's all still moving around, but it's about 3,500 on the first floor, potentially 1,000 to 1,200 square foot cafe also on the first floor.
Gotcha.
And then there's about 1,500 square feet on the second floor.
Gotcha. And in accordance with current code, how much occupancy does that give you in total? What's your occupancy capacity by code?
The occupancy, it'll depend on the layout of the restaurant by code, or are you asking about the parking?
No, the occupancy of the restaurant.
Right, that'll depend somewhat on the layout.
Ish, but if you're doing 30 something hundred square feet, you know, in accordance with the code, how many exits or entrances you might have, the path of travel, you know what kind of capacity you can get in there or occupancy, regardless of what design is. So is there an understanding of what capacity there can be in those retail spaces?
Certainly in terms of as it pertains to meeting the code and entrances and exits, yes. But as for how many seats, no, that's all going to depend on the final layout and what restaurateur we actually sign a deal with.
I understand. So if it was a white box, what's the occupancy of that white box if it's intended for food and beverage?
We really can't answer that. The white box, there is no such thing as a standard white box in the restaurant business, unfortunately. It will meet code with regard to
Obviously.
parking, the access, the ingress, the egress, handicap, ADA regs, everything.
So I really want to get to an understanding of what your occupancy can be. So if it's 3,200 square feet and it's planning to be a sit-down restaurant, are you saying you can get an occupancy of 150 to 200 in that? 250, 300? I'm not saying a restaurateur will choose to put that many seats or have that many customers or have that many employees. But what can be the occupancy of 3,200 square feet?
Again, I just don't think we can address that, Ken. It's up to the design of the restaurant, the type of restaurant, where they choose to, whether it's a party room they choose on the 1,500 square feet or not. What the concept is, it's just not.
I think Ken is just trying to get what is the potential? Like obviously the variables are infinite, but we just want to understand like what's the potential maximum.
Would it be better to just relate it to what's currently there? I mean, we've got a little pub that's currently there.
Yeah, I don't know how many seats Little Pub has, but I think we're not going to a restaurant and saying this is the maximum number of seats you can fill. Go for it. Restaurateurs tend to have a very definite opinion of the flow they want, where they want the bar, where they want the bathrooms, where they want the seats. So we generally leave that up to the restaurateur's architect to make a lot of those decisions.
I understand fully. I truly do. I understand what in the end a restaurant may choose as occupancy. What I'm trying to get at is what will the code allow with maximum occupancy? Once again, at 3,200 square feet, there's a chance that could be a 200-seat restaurant. Am I wrong on that?
Steve, what code are you referring to, I guess is the question I'm asking. Because there's no code anymore with regard to parking.
I'm not asking about parking. I'm
No,
asking
there are codes with regard to the health department, with regard to ADA, with regard to access to egress and ingresses. Is that the code you're talking about? Because there is no single code that tells you what a white box, as you say, would allow for a restaurant occupancy. So
Once it's laid out, you will obviously be
once
able
it's
to.
laid out, that will be a different story. That's the point we're trying to make, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know that we can answer that question today, Ken.
I
think
don't
kind of just like what would the fire department say is illegal to seat
know
like
how that can be, but okay.
Well, we'll have, as Ken indicated, we're going to code review later this month. The fire department, police department will be there represented, as will all the other regulatory agencies in town. They'll have an opportunity to provide comments, which will be taken into consideration by the Planning and Zoning. The Planning and Zoning Commission gets a full set of minutes from the code review meeting, including comments from all the regulatory agencies. So I imagine that will be hashed out at that time when we get before the Planning and Zoning Commission with the full traffic and parking analysis that's been performed.
Yeah, guys, I'm not trying to
So I
be,
think what we have here is a overall concept to do a mixed-use redevelopment of this site to include retail and office space, largely on the existing footprint. Obviously, it entails a second and third story to existing buildings that are, I believe, one story for the most part. I will say that the comments during concept review with planning and zoning were, gee, can't you do more on this site? I think, again, we're looking at a fairly modest redevelopment. To encourage redevelopment, you kind of have to do a little bit more than what's there currently in order for it to make economic sense for all parties involved. So I think this is a pretty exciting transformation of this key intersection corner. And it does have a lot of safety improvements, to your point earlier, Steve, for pedestrian and vehicular users of the corridor. Certainly the elimination of curb cuts and this promotion of cross connections where people don't have to access one of the busy roads to do their shopping and other needs is something I think we've long tried to encourage. So
This is just my opinion. I mean, it is a tired property. I mean, particularly that building in the back. The design looks great. I think the concern that we're expressing, and maybe it's just me, the density in the town and traffic continues to mount, and just want to make sure. And it sounds like a lot of this is being considered and thought in with the additional parking, removing the curb cuts, but just want to really understand what we're endorsing. If this does, we're not going to exacerbate like what seems to be going on in a lot of developments, and just trying to think ahead with some of the other ones that are coming online around them. That's all. I mean, that's what we're trying to get to, I think. Hopefully, if anyone feels differently, please say so.
I think Ken, I think what you were saying is where the arrows are down here on the left, that goes to the other shopping center, correct?
correct.
Yeah. So like if you're traveling, Steve, from south of Black Rock, theoretically, you don't even have to go to Black Rock to get to those shopping centers, which now you do. So I think even from that standpoint, you're cutting off, I would pull right in there and go back and not even deal with Black Rock Turnpike.
That's the idea.
So
Yeah.
that entranceway, which I use a lot, if you look on Massage Envy, Old Navy and whatever. So it can be challenging, depending on which direction you're coming from, with the amount of traffic that's crossing. Especially if you want to go into the opposite side to turn. And you've got the light down there at the end of Fairfield Woods Road, which staggers a little bit of the traffic. Then you've got the traffic coming on the other side on Black Rock Turnpike. So is there anything that's going to be done with that particular entranceway, or is it just going to be as it is?
As of now, it will stay the way it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good point. Left out of there is.
I know when I want to turn left, it's challenging.
Yeah.
That parking
So,
lot.
but maybe people would be incentivized to use that second out and just go
I'm
around.
guessing they probably would.
Yeah. Forget it. I think that is huge. The one way in and one way
Yeah.
out. That's
And, we do have this long-term plan, not funded, but we have a concept plan for Black Rock Turnpike to try to, again, make it a little bit more pedestrian-friendly. It's currently not very, but also to improve safety for everyone that uses it. So I think the original concept plan included some roundabouts. We're revisiting some of those, partly because of cost, which includes property acquisition, partly because, they're just, maybe it's not the right tool for this particular location. But certainly, creating some additional queuing capacity at these intersections would make sense to, if we can, within the right of way. But, positioning traffic further away so you don't add to that or exacerbate those conditions is all to be applauded, I think. So
I have one additional question. I'm just confirming because I feel like I heard what I heard, but I just want to confirm there is no residential component with this, right?
There is none planned, no.
I'm out of genuine curiosity. Why is that? Why is there no residential?
Well, some of it is economics. Some of it is that we are listening to the town. And the rest is really that, we believe that this works as a mixed use purely by office and restaurant and retail. We don't see the need to add residential there.
I really appreciate your honest and I think very measured approach that you guys have taken. I think there's a lot of goodness here. I will say, just to piggyback on Steve, I've lived in town I grew up in town, left for a little bit for college and for work, but obviously came back, and I still have a lot of friends who live here, and I sent them a screen grab of this proposal because they're always asking me, because I'm somewhat involved in town stuff, and know more than the average person, unfortunately. I sent them a screen grab and said, hey, what do you think of this at the corner where Little Pub is? Universally, everyone was like, oh, great, just what we need. More traffic, or, more chaos. So I think you guys are probably very aware of this. It sounds like you are, but there's, as I said during the RTM meeting last year when we were talking about the Connecticut Municipal Development Authority, our entire state, especially our town, has PTSD when it comes to any sort of new building, regardless of what that building is, that happens in our town because of what I'll call assault that has happened with just the amount of development that has happened. So I think you just have to be very aware that there is that very real sentiment, regardless of what's actually going in.
Fair enough.
I have a few more questions. Ken, what do you expect the office population to be?
The office population, you mean the number of employees?
Yeah. If you fill your office square feet, what's your expected population?
We'll check the parking study, what they actually use for.
Yeah, we can definitely get back to you on that. But it would not be a very dense office use. We've talked primarily to financial related users, everyone from consultancies to brokers.
So what ratio are you using? 250 square feet per one employee, 200 square feet per one employee, 150?
The ratios really are not being used anymore. It's all based on whether or not the parking needs assessment shows that the parking needs are being addressed. So it really doesn't go to the ratios anymore.
Yeah, we did cover this at the last I had a fairly lengthy conversation on parking. I'm sure we're going to have additional conversations on parking coming up, but for multi-use plazas, I think it's been pretty well documented that we have generally, in most cases, have an overabundance of impervious surface parking. And so the thought was to come up with a more rational scheme that is driven by the use, but also looking at other factors, including offsetting demands, and to do a parking analysis for these multi-tenanted plazas and come up with something that made sense for both the applicant, property owner, as well as the town through its planning and zoning commission. So as Ken mentioned, this will be the first application in which, they're presenting a parking needs assessment, parking analysis that the commission will then have to review and determine whether or not it meets their requirements. But, we spent a lot of time looking at some of these larger commercial plazas and documented very well that we're looking at 40% utilization rates and large parking fields that are unused, which really doesn't help anyone, doesn't help the environment, doesn't help the users of the plaza. So I think that's what we're trying to get at, which is not be so rigid, but and then keep adding where we don't really need additional parking, but then look at areas where we do need parking and figure out how best to meet those demands. So I think some of this, we're gonna, I think what I would suggest is, as we've done in the past, we're not experts in wetlands, we're not experts in traffic or parking. We can express a generalized concern or observation relative to those things. These are things that the commission will obviously have to weigh as they begin their deliberations. So that's what I would encourage, capturing some of these comments and concerns and incorporate that into a letter if the commission feels that's appropriate.
Yeah, I just want to be mindful of the time. And thank you, Ken. And I'm sorry to get your partner's name there, but this is exciting. It looks great, and it well overdue for an update. Even just seeing like the faded paint on the Dolan's corner there from the old. I mean, it was probably from the I don't know when, but just making sure that we're contributing to the evolution of the town and not contributing to the problems here.
Thank you. We appreciate that. And I mean it sincerely when I say we welcome the comments, and not just in this forum, but I know Mark knows how to get in touch with me, or many of you do. Please reach out to us with anything that you think of after this meeting or any other time before the development actually begins, assuming we do achieve approval.
I don't envy you I would imagine both Posters and Hanson's and Little Pub are fairly beloved. So
they are. And, I grew up here as well. And I, spent a lot of time at the center. And that's why one of our first outreaches was to Bert at Posters and to the two partners at Blossoms, which I still think of as dailies.
Mm-hmm. Anything else, Steve, or shall we continue on?
we should,
If we have time to consider this at our next meeting, if the commission so chooses to put forward a letter in support, capturing comments and observations, thoughts with regard to this, and perhaps as a result of the code review meeting coming up, I can share any conversations or thoughts that the police or fire may have relative to circulation, parking, occupancy, and the like to address Kenny's concerns.
I'll just suggest taking it offline. We could maybe do it in an email thread, and people could weigh in there.
No, I wouldn't suggest that at all.
All right.
No, we can take this up for further conversation at our next meeting.
Thank you all for your time. Very much
Thanks for
appreciated.
coming in. Really
Thank you.
May I just ask your name?
I'm Evan, I'm sorry, and partner was a serious upgrade. I'm just his son.
Well, I don't get you got the distant view from here.
All right, thank you very much. Have a good day, everybody.
See you, Ken. Bye.
I think there's a question also in the chat, the plaza next door. No, it is not owned by the Starbucks Plaza, is owned by a separate entity. So I think that is the parcel beyond Starbucks is owned by Regency Cleban. So that's the cross connections that are being referred to. All right. So Ken, would you like to go back? Steve, rather, would you like to go back to our agenda?
Yeah, I think I can give a quick update on. I don't know if I'm out of order here. I have too many screens open. The EDC University Alliance. We're working on the survey. We should be able to deploy that. Colin, Mark, and I have been doing that. Mark, I don't know if you had any success in catching up with Beverly, if they're able to deploy it through the chamber as well.
I don't think that'll be an issue in terms of getting the word out to the business community. I have uploaded it to SurveyMonkey. I do need to go through it and make a few changes in terms of the logic sequence and all that. And then I'll share a test with both you and Colin to get your feedback before we make it live. But yeah, we're working on that.
And just as a reminder, we're doing a survey just to try and get a baseline of what is most impactful for the local businesses and communities, making sure like anything that we do dovetails with what has value, I suppose. I figured I'd wait till now, but just want to do another quick, probably, I don't know if it'll be quick, but at least another, get the group together via Zoom before the end of May, and then go over just our upcoming agenda for what we want to do, and hopefully try and have something on the tangible that we could work towards for the fall. So I'll send out a survey out checking dates and availability of folks who were at the last meeting. But sometime in that last week of May, I know we're coming against graduations and whatnot. And then after that, just getting a meeting cadence going forward. Am I leaving anything out, Mark or Colin?
No, I don't think so. I think that makes sense.
All right, so I'll get out something, hopefully either today or tomorrow, just to get something, a quick Zoom meeting, and then we'll move forward from there. And we should, certainly by the time we get together in person in June, we should have survey results, and then we could have the inventory of the events that both universities are doing and see where we want to lend our support that makes the most sense.
Okay.
And agenda for.
So I know you don't have access to some of the materials I handed out. I was going to share a screen. There are a couple issues that I did want to bring up under my report. I think some of you had expressed interest in a pending matter before planning and zoning. There are actually several proposed regulation amendments, one of which concerns the establishment of conservation parking mitigation districts, and I provided, and I'll share with those joining online some background relative to this. This all originated with Public Act 25-1, which prohibits municipalities from establishing minimum parking requirements for residential development with less than 16 residential or dwelling units. For those developments that have more than 16 units, a municipality may require the lesser of one space for each studio or one bedroom and 2 spaces for dwellings with 2 or more bedrooms, or the number of off-street parking spaces as recommended by a parking needs assessment. But this act also allows municipalities to designate up to 2 conservation and traffic mitigation districts, within which a municipality may require a minimum number of off-street parking spaces for a residential development that contains fewer than 16 units. Those districts can't be more than each more than 4% of the municipality's land area. So the Planning and Zoning Commission is considering a zoning text amendment that would establish conservation traffic mitigation districts. There are several under consideration, including one in the Southport area, as well as one in the Fairfield Beach rental area, as well as Fairfield Center North. There's been conversations relative to the other parts of town, possibly, and at the moment, the Planning and Zoning Commission has continued a public hearing to solicit some additional public comment on this. So that's why, I know that some commission members had expressed interest in this. Wanted to suggest that this might be something that we want to weigh in or provide any comments if we feel it's appropriate. One of the things that would note that the Plan of Conservation Development recommends that the town conduct a parking study, something that I've long recommended. There's, in my opinion, at least with regard to our core downtown, there's less of a parking problem as a parking perception issue, and not necessarily a great layout, availability or accessibility of the existing parking. So that parking study could both, identify the existing parking that's allowed, there's quite a bit. It may not be as convenient to some folks. A lot of it obviously is reserved for commuting purposes during the day, but that's available generally on nights and weekends, and has been, what our entertainment venues and our restaurants typically have used. It's important to note that most of our restaurants wouldn't exist downtown without the benefit of parking variances, so there hasn't been strict adherence to our own parking regulations, allowed the downtown to thrive as it has. But I do think it would be helpful to look at our parking, look at ways in which we could better leverage those facilities. Maybe it's through wayfinding. Maybe it's also through improvements. I mentioned to the first select person at one point, I had talked to businesses about maybe changing the alignment of certain streets. We have streets in town that allow two-way traffic with parking on either side that are parallel parking. Potentially some communities have adopted one way in, one way out that allows for a doubling in parking capacity if you reorient it. There might also be opportunities at some point to better leverage the existing parking field at the train station to make it a lot more accessible for folks to use. So I do think that would be helpful. I understand, given our last conversation, parking and traffic are very much a concern. So I do think it would be appropriate for the commission if we can come to some consensus that the hearing is open. So it's always difficult to put in concisely in words what we feel about it, but it's clearly something that's a hot topic now, and just wanted to bring it to your attention.
Quick question. Yeah, I just traveled around the world, got back, and I noticed when I was in San Francisco, Waymo is extremely popular. Are you familiar with Waymo?
No.
Self-driving.
Self-driving vehicles. Let me tell you, they're everywhere in San Francisco. People use them to go to work and to go out at night and do all kinds of things. There's no driver. It's all electronic, it's all satellite driven, whatever. And it's in Arizona, it's in San Francisco, it's in other cities. And I eventually believe it's going to come here. It should, why not? People use Uber now and they use Lyft. But this is going to alleviate a lot of the parking issues if Waymo, and there's another company that competes with Waymo, comes to Fairfield. There's going to be a lot of people from the universities, I imagine, that instead of driving into town and parking, they're just going to get together, 2 or 3 of them, and take Waymo. And the car just drops you off, and then it goes on and picks up the next group of people, and it's all done computerized, et cetera. So I don't know.
I think we can all anticipate maybe in the not so distant future, but definitely in the future where, personal ownership of cars may not be as big a thing as it is now. But in the interim, it is what it is. All of us, we are not, I think one of the things that we're not the city in the sense like New York or Boston, where parking is a separate commodity that you purchase. You don't have to provide parking necessarily on site. It's not expected. It's something you have to buy as a separate commodity. That's not the case. We're a suburban town. You need parking and you need to have a car to perform most of your essential functions here. Get to shopping, do your groceries, pick up kids at after school activities. We don't have the access to mass transit, and we're not quite yet at the point where, while we're, got Uber and Lyft and things like that, which is an option, it's not quite as, we're not quite there yet. So
Right.
I do think, I do see where it's coming.
Give it a few years.
I do think it's coming, but it may take us a few years in the land of steady habits.
Yeah. My biggest concern with this is it's complicated, right? To think through. But in town, we all, I'm sure, have experienced going downtown in populous times of the day. And it's really hard to find a parking spot because I think there have been a lot of variances given to, okay, these are designated spots for this business and designated spots for this business and town designated spots for the police department and blah, blah, So, and then when Rite Aid went offline, that took a lot of spots away from certainly the restaurants on that street. And to your point, like even not during the day, but in the evening time, it was pretty packed in the Rite Aid lot with, I assume, people going to the restaurants in town. So my biggest thing is if there's more potential residential developments in the immediate downtown area that are now going to require additional parking for those spots where I think today there's not required parking.
No, the new statute basically prohibits communities from establishing a minimum parking requirement for developments with less than 16 residential dwelling units, which includes single-family, two-family, three-family.
So then,
is what we see. Now, would
businesses
developers do that? Typically not. I'm not saying it would be impossible, but developers need to obviously create a product that is marketable. And, I don't think that you can create a product here, like in a Boston or New York, where you say, you don't have a spot for your car. You got to go buy a parking space someplace else. I think most responsible, and I understand that there are not responsible people out there, would not cut their nose off to spite their face. They would want to create parking because that's what tenants expect. The people that they're marketing these units for will expect at least a parking spot and for their personal use. And I think the Exhibit A is for these 830G applications, which we don't like, given the option of pretty much blowing out any zoning regulation. They don't have to follow local zoning. All developments created at least one parking spot per unit, all those 830Gs, and oftentimes more. So maybe not 2 or 3 spaces, but between 1 and 1.5 spaces per unit. So I'm not sure I don't know how much of an issue that will be, but I understand the concern. You don't want to
you don't want the businesses to get affected by addition. I mean, look at Pantry.
Right.
We're just so tight on parking that any risk to limiting parking for the small businesses.
But that is the beauty of the downtown too, which is we don't have buildings with giant parking fields around it. In fact, I think the Planning and Zoning Commission should be congratulated for taking a look at, the Bob's Plaza and other situations like that and saying, hey, do we really need to keep adding parking just based on occupancy and number of spaces per square foot or use? And that didn't make a lot of sense because we have large parking fields with no one in it. So they have switched that to a parking needs assessment. And I think the other thing that they are trying to do is encourage people to share parking so that when you go to Rite Aid, that you don't have to, even though maybe that's not a great example because I'm sure it wasn't.
Signs all over.
It wasn't.
Rite Aid usage only.
But you go other plazas where it says parking for this tenant only.
Right.
And we want to get away from that so you can leave your car, you can walk around. That's the beauty of the downtown. We want to encourage that.
Right.
Well, I think Jen's point is it's complicated. I mean, the parking regulations are how old and we haven't been addressed. And there's been a significant shift in the growth of the universities, as well as the downtown. Instead of being anchored by the Fairfield store, it's a lot more boutiques, and now there's going to be a lot more residential. So it should be looked at and addressed looking forward, opposed to maintaining status quo.
I totally agree that it should be looked at, and that's why I would strongly suggest that we recommend, even if, and again, I'm willing on your behalf to put money towards a parking study, because I do think it would be helpful. I think we have parking. It's not always rationally laid out. It's not always well understood as to who can use it, what and when they can use it. There's a cacophony of signs down there that, if those of us who have lived in town or been in town for many years understand it, but if you're new to the area, maybe you're dropping your kids off at school, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I do think that, there is some benefit to taking a closer look at this and figure out ways in which we can make it better.
And the businesses are aware, I assume. Are they aware of this?
They're aware of it. Again, parking is, most businesses runs both ways because they want the benefit of not having to provide required parking. That's why they've asked for variances. But at the same time, they want parking that's convenient for themselves, their employees, and their customers. And oftentimes that means I need to have a parking space directly in front of my place of business. And that's just not how downtowns function. We need to get away from that. And if we want the downtown that we cherish to stay that way, I think we need to look at ways in which we can provide for shared parking facilities, encourage, common use, whether that's incentivizing private property owners to do that so it's not like carved out for tenants of this particular building but those are things I think we should definitely look at. Now, I don't think it hurts to have a conservation, parking mitigation districts. I think that don't see an issue with that. I don't know either way. I don't think it's going to, if we adopt that, I don't think it's going to spell the end of development. I don't think if we don't adopt it that there are two people going to be building things with no parking, no consideration for parking, but parking is an issue. So I do think that some of the areas they talked about, I get a lot of complaints in the Fairfield Beach area in terms of off-street parking and number of cars parked in. And a lot of it's because of rentals, right? So a lot of the off-street stuff is in
Rentals and
multifamily,
I think,
in multifamily zones.
and going to the beach.
Right.
You try to go on a summer day down to the beach.
This is a perfect
and,
time, right?
it's
People
like
park
filled
there.
with cars.
Right.
So.
Which, also has its benefits
Right.
too, because it's, if you have cars on both sides in a narrow roadway, your natural inclination as a driver is to slow down. So it's almost a natural traffic calming measure at the same time, to do that. But
Considering the town's.
Mark, did you say you had resources to do a survey or a budget to do that?
look, I think the survey is not going to tell you very much.
Or a
It's
study,
gonna-
not a survey, I meant a study.
No, I think number one, let's start with an inventory of what we have, both public and private parking. Look at ways in which we could better utilize that parking, including improvements. Maybe there's areas where we can add parking as appropriate. But part of it too is just how it's laid out, how it's understood by the public, where they can use, when they can use it, and making it more accessible to folks. So to answer your question, Steve, yeah, I think we could. So we charge businesses to provide for parking areas that their owners and employees can use. It's, portions of Sherman Green, portions of Sanford Street. We set those aside for downtown employee use. As part of that, I think we would look at tapping into or using a portion of those funds that are collected to manage those facilities and make sure they're in good maintenance. But part of that, we could look at, investigating this. Now, whether there are other sources, I think there might be other sources out there, other stakeholders that we could potentially involve in this. But I think, I think a parking study would be very helpful. As to, the proposed districts, Southport, I think most of the focus really is on what's the configuration of the downtown, or are there other areas that we should consider? So
All this is doing is basically forcing them to go under the old code insofar as they're requiring a certain number versus being able to do the needs assessment?
So what it would do is if we had a conservation parking mitigation district, what it would allow is the community to establish a minimum parking requirement for developments with less than 16 residential units. Which is.
It just eliminates the exemption that
Yeah.
was just introduced.
It says that you can't have parking minimums for developments with less than 16 residential units. But except in areas where you've established these districts, in which case you can revert back to the 1 space per studio or 1 bedroom, 2 spaces for 2 bedrooms or more, or as recommended by a parking needs assessment. So the lesser of those two. So
can I ask about this, this graph? So in the past.
I didn't get to that yet.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. All right.
We're getting through the
Sorry.
parking thing first.
Considering the speed cameras are about to come in and it's a revenue generating
Yeah,
idea,
there you go.
has there been any conversation in town about generating revenue through parking, like parking meters?
There have been on and off conversations about that. So, again, just my thought and something that the commission could recommend as a concrete action. Certainly if we have thoughts on the proposed districts, I'm sure that we could say, why not establish these districts? I don't know if we have a consensus around what the district should be. But I do think that regardless of what we do, I think a parking inventory, a parking analysis, a parking study, this has been I started work more than 2 decades ago, and it was an issue then. Now, I've never had an issue finding parking. I may have to drive around a little bit to find a parking spot, but I've always found parking. I've never had to turn around I can't find parking, I'm going home. I think, again, if you talk to folks, it's, the fact that parking is not as convenient as they'd like it to be. And I get that. But if you look at a downtown versus going to a suburban mall, people park half a mile away and walk to a mall to get into the entrance, and they won't, want to walk more than a couple hundred feet to get to a store if you park around the corner. So it is partly there's part reality and part perception. I think just trying to come up with something that we can all agree on. I do think that would be a helpful step.
I think that would be a helpful step. Yeah.
So
I don't know if we want to cover anything else on.
Is that a motion to vote on a sort of an inventory and a study?
Well, what I would suggest is if the commission felt appropriate, I could draft a letter expressing generalized support for the establishment of these conservation districts, and within that, hopefully capture, that recommendation that we think it would be appropriate to do a parking study.
Yeah.
As recommended by their own plan, so.
Okay,
Sound okay?
sounds good.
I'll make a motion.
I'll motion.
Motion to vote on that?
I'll motion.
Second. All those in favor?
Yes.
Okay. So it did, and I know we're running late on time. I just want to, and this is not for action, I did want to have a conversation briefly on Tungus Hill corridor.
My apologies. I thought it was really
Yeah,
to
so-
the districts that they were proposing.
No. Sorry about that. I know there's a bunch of stuff in your packet. So in the plan of conservation development 2, it recommends we look at the zoning classifications in the Tungus Hill corridor. And if you look online, if you go online, you'll see a number of, and this is not particular to Tungus Hill, but there are other parts of town where you have split zones. You have parcels that partially fall in a commercial zone and partially in a residential zone. And at some point, we like to eliminate that. So either the parcel falls within the commercial zone or residential zone, but not both, because it's really hard to figure that stuff out. Part of the thinking here and what drove this initially was we had a couple businesses, one business in particular, that wanted to provide additional services to their customer. It's a car wash. I'm sure you can figure out which one. They wanted to provide oil changes. And the response from zoning at the time was that's not a permitted use within the neighborhood business district. So we had talked about different options to resolve that issue. One is you can amend the regulations to make it a permitted use. But of course, there are other neighborhood business districts where that might not be so desirable. When you think of neighborhood business districts, you think it might be Greenfield Hills, Southport Village, Stratfield even. Maybe you don't want to encourage that type of use. So you could also perhaps request a variance, but really, is there a hardship here? Not really. One of the other options is, well, gee, why is this neighborhood design? It's on a state highway. It's a commercial corridor. Maybe we should consider just changing the zone to a commercial, which would allow a whole variety of other uses that you typically find in commercial areas. And in fact, part of the SCAP dealership buildings are partially in the design commercial and partially in the neighborhood design business district, which again doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I've been talking to a couple of the business owners and say, would this be helpful? And property owners. And the response thus far is, yes, this would be helpful. So the thought would be to maybe look at just a very small area, primarily on the north side of Tungus Hill, but to encompass the existing SCAP buildings, dealership buildings, on the south side, 387. And if you look at the zoning map, it's actually split. So we would propose to convert those from neighborhood design to design commercial. Now, I'm not completely through with my discussions, my outreach to property owners. I just wanted to bring it up to see whether the commission would be supportive of being the applicant on behalf of the businesses here. And we'll continue to outreach to those businesses to see again what their feelings are. But I just wanted to bring it up at this time just to get a general sense and answer questions.
Mark, sorry, maybe I missed this. What's the difference between the designed commercial versus a neighborhood designed business?
So a neighborhood design business district is a bit more restrictive, both in terms of permitted commercial uses.
Okay.
It's also generally, it doesn't, there are some differences in terms of coverage, lot coverage. I think neighborhood design, I think to Steve's question, neighborhood design would be a 30-foot, 3-floor maximum. Commercial is generally 40-foot, 4-floor maximum. So there is some, now we have, the SCAP, if you've driven past them, they're multi-story buildings to begin with. Very substantially built, I think likelihood is that those would be, they're for sale, but they would be reused in some fashion as part of this. But I'm not anticipating a lot of, the Operation Hope parcel is part of this, which would include, the garage site that we leased to them and the church property. They want to build their new administrative offices and food pantry on that location.
Is that what about that little house that sits in between that's commercial?
Which one?
It's right on the
540 on the corner?
Yeah. I think there's
I don't anticipate any change. If they, but this would clearly help one of the businesses that was first to bring this up. I would anticipate he would, I don't even think the car wash is a permitted use in the neighborhood design business district, so it's a non-conforming use. He would want to continue that and expand his services to support his business operation. But yeah, I think my plan is to talk to everyone that would be directly impacted, get a general sense, and then come back to you with a recommendation, if that's okay.
And so the residence B one?
Would leave them alone.
So there's a couple.
There is a couple. Those
Because they fall
two
within the block,
residents
like you were
B
saying.
are part of this. SCAP owns them.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, got it.
So
you know,
42 and 24.
trying to, trying to make it all,
Yeah.
that parcel all zoned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And same with, so 554 also jumps from Residence B to,
554 is the church property, so I'm not thinking that it's going to change. But again, it's one of those split zones that, should be either in or out, And I think as we go through this, we're trying to make, this simplifies it. But if you go online, you look at it, you'll see what I'm talking about, where the zone classification goes across parcel lines, and it just makes it that much more difficult for everyone. So I know that the commission is where they can trying to, make sense of that.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Sense.
Okay. All right. Anything else that, I have a few quick reports, but don't want to monopolize the time here. If anyone has any questions.
You addressed everything that, full agenda. We got through all of it, I think, just pending your update, Mark, I guess.
Yeah, the only other thing I'll mention quickly, we had Shop and Stroll in a spring event last evening. Weather wasn't perfect, but a decent turnout, all things considered. I did want to mention, I included in the packet, and I'll send out to everyone, we've launched with the Fairfield Arts Commission a pilot initiative called Local Walls, which we're hoping to connect local artists with local businesses through art installations in those places of businesses throughout town. So we are actively recruiting businesses for that first pilot. I've talked to a few that have volunteered, but if you know of anyone, please let me know. And we do have a public hearing coming up on Neighborhood Assistance Act program. Again, from the business standpoint, we have 5 applications from usual suspects, Wakeman's Boys and Girls Club, FTC, among others. But this is a program offered by the state where the state provides a tax credit against the corporate tax liability in exchange for donations to approve local programs run by either municipal agencies or nonprofits. So we'll be going through that process later next month, rather. So, and with that, I know I'm over time, so I'll be happy to answer any other questions.
Stephen, may I make a quick comment? Hi, so I just wanted to really just comment on the discussion on the proposed development at Black Rock Turnpike and Stilson. Since I am in District 2, obviously a lot of my constituents go down Black Rock Turnpike and go to that area. Just based on when I was campaigning and listening to their feedback, I would say it is, regardless of how functional and beautiful that new, and I personally think it's fantastic what they're proposing, but I know that just kind of kind of confirming what some others expressed their concern that the residents in my area are going to say, well, how much traffic is it going to impact and what's the parking going to be? And I don't want it to increase any of that. So that's like their gut kind of reaction. So I just want to throw that out as sort of just representative of what I think constituents have did.
Yeah, I think you're right, Craig. There's a lot of sensitivity to any kind of proposed development in terms of what the impacts might be from not just parking and traffic, but sewer capacity, everything else. Mm-hmm. Those do need to be evaluated and considered by the appropriate authorities, planning and zoning being one. But I will say, too, the same folks are like saying, how do I reduce my property taxes? And one way to do that is through growing the grand list, which I hear all the time from the Board of Finance. I'm going to have another command appearance later this month where they're talking about how we increasing our commercial grand list. And so this is a perfect example where you're looking at a modest redevelopment. I think, in my view, it's a very modest redevelopment of the property. I think that was captured by some of the comments from the Planning and Zoning Commission. Isn't there an opportunity to do more on this site? And I think, again, it's a balancing act. So it makes sense for the developer. They have to do a certain amount of development for the project to pencil out, but they're not looking to overdevelop this thing to the point where you've got a lot of adverse impacts that you have to consider. So
I get that.
It
Just,
is-
I personally think
balance
it's
it.
I think it's a great development. Just saying what the constituents would say, and they're not necessarily thinking about, well, yeah, we need to increase the grand list. So
Right, because it's, it impacts them directly. I get it, because the grand list is one of those things that impacts everyone. And then you talk about a specific development project, obviously it has a very localized impact. So
Yeah.
it depends on who's
Well,
being
to
who's being
Ken's-
affected.
To Ken's point too, and Craig, I'm sure you know this, there's a lot of misinformation that gets circulated on Moms of Fairfield and various channels that, people take to heart and don't inform themselves of what actually is the case.
That's hard.
So as much as we can encourage people to get involved and, read the details themselves versus believing what they hear on social media, I think we're all for the better.
And that's why I think it's really important to have facts, so.
Facts matter.
Yeah, just considering the impacts, but I don't know if it's accurate, but the Henry Ford quote is like, if you asked someone what they wanted, they'd ask for a faster horse. Just trying to have the vision look ahead, and I think they're really thoughtful about pushing that one way in, one way out, further down, accessing the other property is, I think, innovative and alleviates a lot of what's going on. Removing those curb cuts on Black Rock Turnpike. If you ask people what they want, they'll never ask for change. Hopefully this aligns with improving. I mean, those are tired properties.
They are. So we'll circle back. Certainly, I'll have the benefit of what we hear at the code review, and we have time, I think, for the commission to further consider comments with regard to that proposal. And then with regard to the parking mitigation districts, I'll draft something for your review, Mr. Chair, and as part of that, express generalized support for the establishment of these districts, but acknowledge some of the concerns that we've heard expressed here today. At the same time, recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission look at ways in which we could do a further analysis to get at some of the facts so we can better inform ourselves as to what the current situation is and how we can make improvements to it. So if that sounds like a rational plan, then I'll put that together for you.
I think we have a plan.
And I know we're well over time, so thank you all.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, everyone have a great day.
Thank you all.